Hey guys, it's Corey from Redefining Strength. Today I want to share with you 7 simple core exercises to help you prevent lower back pain. Often when our lower back is in pain, we think that it's weak. We turn to trying to strengthen the area. Often where we have the pain though isn't where the problem is. And if we're doing all the strengthening for our lower back, we might not be seeing the results we want. Often it's other muscles that are weak or underactive and other areas that are immobile that we need to address. So if you have lower back pain, you need to focus on your entire core and strengthening it from your shoulders to your knees. That's why I wanted to share 7 simple moves that will help you strengthen your obliques, abs, and glutes to help you protect your lower back from becoming overloaded. Exercise number 1 is the pelvic tilt leg glides. If you're constantly feeling your lower back engaged during core work, you want to use the pelvic tilt leg glides. It's a great way to learn how to brace your abs. This will help you improve your spinal stability as well as your hip stability by not only engaging your abs, but also your hamstrings. For this move, you can use paper plates, towels on hardwood floor, or even sliders. When you do this move, you're trying to master the posterior pelvic tilt. You're learning how to press your lower back into the ground. When you press your lower back into the ground, you're actually drawing your hip bones up towards your rib cage. You want to think about really engaging those abs to stabilize your hips and spine. As you keep this engagement, you're going to extend one leg out on the towel or slider. You want to extend the leg out without shifting your hips. Pull that heel back in using your hamstring. You really want to engage your hamstring to pull that leg back in. To advance the movement, you can alternate sides, or if you're just starting out and really struggling to keep your hips still, stay on one side. You want to make sure that you're tilting your pelvis to engage your glutes, but also using your hamstring to pull that heel back in. This is even a great move to build up to that glute bridge and curl if you're really struggling with your lower back compensating. Exercise number 2 is the stability press. This is a great move to work on your anti-rotational core strength and really strengthen your obliques, abs, glutes, quads, even your upper back to support your shoulders. It's also commonly called the Pallof press. This move can be done from a variety of postures, whether or not you're standing, kneeling, or even seated. By simply changing the positioning of your body or your posture, you can advance or regress the movement to meet your specific needs. We don't always have to add loads. And sometimes trying to force heavier loads will not allow us to engage the correct muscles. We lose that mind-body connection and we end up recruiting our lower back, which is the exact thing we're trying to prevent. When you do this move, you're going to stand with your side towards the anchor point. You want to fight that urge to rotate back open towards the anchor point. You're going to engage your upper back as you hold and really squeeze your glutes and flex your quads. You're engaging your upper back to stabilize your shoulders as you're bracing your abs and squeezing your glutes to stabilize your spine and hips. You want to press out slowly from your chest. Really fight the urge to rotate towards that anchor point. If you want to advance the move by standing, simply bring your feet closer together. You can also then go to half kneeling or even seated on the ground if you want to advance the movement and take away some of that ability to take movement out of other joints. If you're really struggling to avoid rotation, it might be smart to even start from kneeling or seated on the ground because then you won't be able to rotate your hips at all. You will have to start with a lighter band. As you perform the press, don't rush it just because you're fatiguing. If you're tired, stop. The whole point of this movement is to fight that rotation and really focus on what you feel working and establish that mind-body connection to better brace your core. You want to think about keeping your shoulders wide and engaging your upper back to stabilize those shoulders as you don't want to shrug. This really is a full core movement so that you can learn to brace everything and not overload your lower back. Exercise number 3 is the side plank clams. Glute activation is key if you've ever struggled with lower back pain. Plus, strong glutes will help us lift more and run faster. However, that basic clamshell movement is one we often outgrow very quickly. So the side plank clam is a great way to advance that movement and even make it target everything between your shoulders and your knees. Not only will it target your glute medius and glute max, but it will also work your obliques and even your upper back to support your shoulders. When you do this movement, you can do it as a straight abduction movement or even external rotation. It just depends on your foot placement. If you really want to work that glute medius and you struggle with your piriformis taking over, try the straight abduction movement. What this means is you're performing a straight lateral raise. You're raising that top leg completely off your bottom leg as you lift up into that side plank. You're not rotating your hip open at all. If you struggle with your piriformis compensating when you do external rotation, a great way to stop that during the side plank clam is to internally rotate that top foot. By turning that top toe down to the ground as you lift up into that side plank and lift that top knee open, you can really focus on activating your glute medius. When you do this move, make sure to drive your hips into extension as you lift up. You want to keep that elbow under that shoulder to really engage your upper back so you're not overloading your shoulder. Feel your oblique, but also the side of your butt working to lift. The added bonus of this movement over the basic clamshell is that you're working not only the bottom side, but also that top glute as well. To advance this movement, you can add a midi band, but you want to focus on the mind-body connection over simply adding loads. Focus on what you really feel working to lift up. You can also progress the side plank clam by doing a side plank leg raise, but just remember that this full side plank position is more challenging and you really need to flex your feet to engage all the way through your leg. Exercise number 4 is the glute bridge with rocks. If you've ever had lower back pain, you've probably done the glute bridge. It's a must-do move to learn how to use the posterior pelvic tilt to protect your lower back while also strengthening your glutes. You need to learn how to use your glutes to drive your hips into full extension if you want to avoid lower back compensation during bigger compound lifts or even when you run. The glute bridge with rocks is a great way to use that glute bridge but also add in a unilateral focus, especially if you can't yet do that full single leg variation. We have to remember that fully unilateral or fully single leg glute bridge is a very advanced movement. If you feel your lower back compensating or your hamstrings taking over, you're not getting the full benefit of that movement. You want to establish that mind-body connection to your glutes and use it to really engage that glute and use it as the prime mover. So if you struggle with that fully unilateral variation, you might want to try the glute bridge with rocks. During this glute bridge variation, you're going to lift up and squeeze your glutes to drive your hips into extension. Don't simply focus on bridging up higher and arching your lower back or engaging your hamstrings. Even think about driving your knees towards your toes as you lift up and driving your upper back and arms into the ground. You want to brace everything to really focus on those glutes driving the hip extension. Holding at the top of this movement, you're going to engage one glute a little bit more than the other. This way you can really establish that mind-body connection so you know you can really correctly engage both glutes. If you do have a weaker side, you might want to do more rocks to that side, but make sure you're actually feeling each glute engage as you're trying to establish that mind-body connection. If you're struggling to engage your glutes, you can always add a mini band around your legs as you perform the rocks. Make sure you don't drop your hips down. You're simply squeezing one glute harder at the top. Exercise number 5 is the single leg reverse hypers. This is a more advanced glute activation exercise, even though it's a unilateral move and the range of motion is very small. It's really easy to allow your lower back or your hamstrings to compensate, which is why this move is so key to include. When you do this movement, you're going to lie on the ground. You lift one heel up towards the ceiling. You can flex that foot to really think about driving the heel up towards the ceiling as you engage the glute to extend that hip. When you engage your glute to drive your hip into hyperextension, you don't want to focus on how high you're lifting. Focus on that glute working to drive the movement and your hamstrings not compensating. You don't want to arch your lower back just to get up higher. You can even think about pressing your hip bone down into the ground as you lift. Doing this move off the ground is a great way to really control that range of motion. You can always progress the reverse hyper by doing it off a bench as well to increase the range of motion. Exercise number 6 is the reverse crunch rolls. Often we avoid crunches when we have lower back pain or we're trying to prevent it, but our abs power spinal flexion. And this reverse crunch movement is a great way to really learn how to engage your abs to control that flexion. This is an advanced movement though, so make sure that you can actually control the roll and really use your abs. By adding the roller into this movement, you'll engage your hamstrings and really help yourself stabilize your hips as well as your spine. You want to hold on to something overhead as well to really help you stabilize and engage your abs to protect your spine. When you do this roll, you don't want to get caught up in trying to make the movement bigger than it actually is. Really focus on tucking those knees in towards your chest and even in towards your elbows. You want to control all movement of your spine as well as your hips. Really squeeze that roller between your hamstrings and your calves. You want to think about just simply tucking up, using your abs to control the movement. You're lifting your butt slightly off the ground or off a bench, and then you're lowering back down. If you don't have a pole to hold on to overhead, you can use a dumbbell or even do this move on a bench to hold on to the bench behind you. Just make sure to move super slowly and really squeeze that foam roller as you slightly tuck your knees in. You won't necessarily extend your legs all the way down or touch your heels to the ground unless you can control the movement and make sure that your abs are still braced. Often when we do other leg lower movements, our hip flexors really take over. This is a great way to make sure they don't during an ab exercise that really engages the lower abs. Exercise number 7 is the plange plank. If you've ever had lower back pain, the plank is a must-do movement. However, all too often we include the plank thinking it's going to make us better, only to let our lower back compensate during the exercise. This is a great variation of that basic plank that allows you to better engage your abs using the posterior pelvic tilt. To do the plange plank, you're actually going to round through your entire spine. By using spinal flexion, we're often able to better use the posterior pelvic tilt to engage not only our abs, but also our glutes. With the plange plank, it looks wrong because you're actually rounding through your entire spine. Your head will tuck slightly because your spine is rounding. You want to think about tilting your hips under. You want to draw your hip bones up towards your rib cage as you really draw your belly button in towards your spine. This will help make sure that you're not engaging your lower back during the plank exercise. You also want to focus on holding harder over holding longer. It's really tempting to try and just hold the plank longer and think we're getting more benefit, but we want to focus on that mind-body connection and actually bracing our abs and squeezing our glutes. You'll even flex your quads as you drive back through your heels. Don't rock forward onto the balls of your feet. Even though you're rounding through your spine, make sure that your shoulders are over your elbows. You don't want to aggravate your shoulders or engage your upper traps. Focus on really engaging those abs and even creating shakage. You want the muscles to shake. To modify this movement, you can do it off a bench. You can also regress to more of a quadrant variation, doing the vomiting cat, where you're actually on your hands and knees rounding up towards the ceiling. Using these 7 moves, you can bulletproof your core to prevent lower back pain no matter your fitness level. You can use some of these as activation before your workout to establish that mind-body connection. Just use lighter loads and fewer rounds. You're not trying to fatigue the muscles, but just establish that mind-body connection and feel the abs, obliques, and glutes working. You can also use them as a finisher if you want to keep your core strong. So using them after your compound lifts and actually working your abs and glutes and obliques to fatigue. Just make sure to focus on the moves that meet your specific needs and goals. If you like the video, make sure to like it, comment below if you have any questions, and subscribe. We're posting new videos each week.